A young couple vanished immediately after their wedding in 1985, as if they had simply driven off into thin air with their brand-new car. But 12 years later, university students analyzing old satellite images spot something shocking in the Everglades, a discovery that would lead investigators to a disturbing revelation no one saw coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Walmart parking lot in Homestead, Florida. Linda Caro pushed her shopping cart through the produce section, methodically selecting tomatoes and examining lettuce heads. At 56, she had developed a routine that helped fill the empty spaces in her life, spaces that had gaped wide since that summer day in 1985 when her only daughter vanished. The shrill ring of her cell phone, still a relatively new possession in 1997, which she had won from the supermarket lottery, startled her from her thoughts. She fumbled in her purse, nearly dropping a bag of oranges in the process. "Hello? Mrs. Caro, this is Detective Jason Pram from the Homestead Police Department. I need to ask where you are right now." Linda's heart skipped. In 12 years, she'd received countless calls that led nowhere, but something in the detective's tone made her grip the phone tighter. "I'm at Walmart doing my grocery shopping. Why? What's happened?" "Mrs. Caro, we need you to come to Everglades National Park. Something related to your daughter Melissa and her husband Brandon has just resurfaced." The words hit her like a physical blow. The phone nearly slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. "What is it? What have you found?" "We've recovered the yellow Ford Thunderbird from the Everglades. We need you for identification purposes. We've also contacted the Whitmore family. Can you meet us at the park parking lot via Main Park Road?" "What's the car?" "After all this time?" Linda's voice cracked. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Without a second thought, she abandoned her half-filled cart in the middle of the aisle. Other shoppers stared as she rushed past, but Linda barely noticed. Her mind raced as she hurried to her aging Honda Civic. The 20-minute drive to Everglades National Park felt both endless and too brief. As she navigated Main Park Road, memories flooded back, memories she'd tried so hard to reconcile over the years. The police had concluded that Melissa had left town voluntarily with Brandon after their wedding. It was the only reasonable explanation they could offer a grieving mother. She'd never believed it, not really. Her daughter wouldn't abandon her, not after everything they'd been through together. Melissa knew what it meant to be raised by a single mother, knew the sacrifices Linda had made. But 12 years of silence had worn down even her stubborn hope. She'd begun to make a fragile peace with the idea that perhaps her daughter had chosen a new life over their old one. Now, with this discovery, that carefully constructed peace crumbled like wet sand. The sight that greeted her at the park made her breath catch. Multiple police vehicles crowded the parking lot, their lights creating a kaleidoscope of red and blue against the morning sky. Rescue authority vehicles added to the controlled chaos. Park rangers directed traffic while officers cordoned off sections with yellow tape. Linda parked hastily and stepped out on unsteady legs. A crowd had gathered, park employees, curious tourists, officials in various uniforms. But her eyes were drawn to the flatbed trailer at the center of it all. There it sat, the yellow Ford Thunderbird, streams of murky water still dripping from its undercarriage. Algae and mud caked its once pristine surface, and the windows were opaque with sediment. But even through 12 years of submersion, she recognized it. Gregory Whitmore had made such a production of gifting it to Brandon for their wedding, insisting on photos with the happy couple beside it. Mrs. Caro. Detective Pram approached, his weathered face grave. He was younger than she'd expected from his phone voice, perhaps early 40s, with the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much human misery. "Detective?" She couldn't take her eyes off the car. "How did you find it? After all this time?" "Let me introduce you to some people who can explain better than I can." He led her to a cluster of young people in University of Miami shirts. They looked barely older than Melissa had been when she disappeared. A young man with sandy hair and earnest eyes stepped forward. Mrs. Caro, I'm Jake Morrison. We're environmental studies students working on a project about land transformation in the Everglades. We've been analyzing historical satellite imagery to track changes over the decades. He pulled out a folder and extracted a grainy photograph. We were studying land loss patterns when we noticed this anomaly in a 1985 satellite image. He pointed to a section of the photo where Linda could just make out a yellow shape partially visible in dark water. When we enhanced and zoomed the image, we could clearly see it was a vehicle. Our professor recognized it might be connected to the old missing persons case from that year. It was big news back then. So we calculated the coordinates and contacted the police. Detective Pram took over. The area where they spotted it is remote enough to have avoided detection all these years. The water depth there is significant, deep enough for a car to sink completely. Over time, it settled to the bottom. The recovery operation took 4 hours, the detective continued. The marine recovery team worked with Florida Fish and Wildlife and our department. We used sonar equipment and divers to confirm the car's exact position, then brought in a police boat to reach the location. A helicopter lifted it out and placed it on the flatbed for transport. Linda heard car doors slam behind her. She turned to see the Whitmore family arriving, Gregory leading the way with his characteristic swagger despite his advancing years, Eleanor following with her perpetual air of long-suffering dignity, and Daniel bringing up the rear. The years had changed them all, but she recognized them instantly. The old anger flared in her chest. She remembered their last interaction too well. Gregory's accusations, his insistence that her low-income daughter had led his precious son astray. As if love could be measured by bank accounts. Detective Pram excused himself to brief the Whitmores. Linda watched Gregory's face as he examined the vehicle, saw the moment of recognition despite his attempt at stoic control. "Yes, that's the Thunderbird I bought Brandon as a wedding gift," Gregory confirmed, his voice carrying clearly across the lot. "The license plate matches, FTB 1985. I had it specially requested." Linda approached despite her better judgment. "What did you recover from inside?" The detective's expression grew more somber. "No remains were found, no blood evidence or signs of struggle that we could detect given the water damage. The only item we recovered was this." He signaled to an officer who brought over an evidence bag containing a silver lighter. Gregory fished in his pocket and produced an identical lighter. "This is mine. That one must be Brandon's. We bought them together at that shop in Miami." Christmas, 1984. Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "Detective, what does this mean? If they're not in the car, where are they? What happens now?" "Mrs. Whitmore, I don't believe your son and daughter-in-law would deliberately dispose of their vehicle in the Everglades, especially not a wedding gift. Someone did this to them in 1985 and tried to eliminate evidence. This is no longer just a missing persons case. It's potentially a criminal investigation." "Criminal?" Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. "You mean someone might have killed them?" "We're exploring all possibilities, but whoever did this knew the area well, knew exactly where the deep water was, how to access this remote location. This suggests someone local." Gregory's face flushed red. "Before you waste taxpayer money on wild theories, you need to send divers back out there. Search for bodies. They might still be underwater." "Our dive teams are conducting searches as we speak, Mr. Whitmore. We'll expand the grid pattern if necessary." Gregory turned abruptly to Daniel, his voice dropping but still audible to those nearby. "This is why it's important to never marry into desperation. Poor girls will ruin your name or destroy you, just like what happened to your brother." "Dad!" Daniel's shock was evident. "You know how much Brandon loved Melissa. She would never—" Linda's control snapped. "Are you still trying to blame my daughter? After all these years?" Gregory rounded on her. "She might have had connections, old boyfriends, gang members from her neighborhood. Someone who got jealous and decided to eliminate my son. Gang members? Linda's voice rose. If my daughter just wanted your money, she wouldn't have disappeared with your son. She would have stayed to collect it. Don't you dare! Gregory stepped forward aggressively. Your son is the one who lured her away from her purity promise? Linda shot back. She wanted to wait until marriage, but he convinced her otherwise. That's why they had to marry so young. Melissa was only 24. The argument escalated rapidly, voices rising, accusations flying. Other visitors stopped to stare. Officers moved to intervene, creating a barrier between the feuding families. That's enough, Detective Pram's authoritative voice cut through the chaos. This behavior helps no one. You're both grieving, both confused. I understand that, but throwing accusations won't bring answers. He guided Linda away from the confrontation. Mrs. Caro, please, everyone's emotions are running high. Don't let him provoke you. He's painting my daughter as some kind of criminal, Linda said, her voice shaking with rage and unshed tears. My baby girl who sang in the church choir, who volunteered at the food bank. I know, we'll review everything back at the station. For now, I need you to go home and try to rest. I'll contact you immediately if there are any developments. Can you drive yourself, or would you like an officer to escort you? Linda took several deep breaths, trying to center herself. I can drive. I need a moment. She walked to her car on unsteady legs, slumping into the driver's seat. Through her windshield, she could see the Whitmores still clustered around the flatbed trailer, Gregory gesticulating wildly as he spoke to the officers. The sight of him, still so arrogant, still so certain of his own righteousness, made her stomach turn. She turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the lot, leaving the circus behind. But she couldn't leave behind the image of that water-stained yellow car or the questions it raised about what really happened on that long-ago summer day. Linda's house felt impossibly quiet as she closed the front door behind her. The adrenaline from the morning's confrontation drained away, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. She stood in her small living room for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. The car, the Everglades, Gregory's accusations. Almost without conscious thought, her feet carried her down the narrow hallway to Melissa's room. She hadn't been inside for months, couldn't bear it most days. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and a musty smell immediately assaulted her nostrils. 12 years of neglect had taken their toll. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through yellowed curtains. The cheerful floral wallpaper she and Melissa had picked out together was now faded and peeling at the corners. Everything remained exactly as Melissa had left it that June morning in 1985. Makeup scattered on the dresser, a romance novel face down on the nightstand, her favorite sundress draped over the desk chair. But time had not been kind to these abandoned treasures. The clothes in the open closet were spotted with mold, the fabric degraded and discolored. The stuffed animals on the bed were matted with dust, their button eyes dull. "Oh, baby girl," Linda whispered, her throat tight. She threw open the windows, letting fresh air chase away the staleness. Then she fetched cleaning supplies and cardboard boxes from the garage. If the police were reopening the investigation, they might need to examine Melissa's belongings. And perhaps it was time to finally pack away these physical reminders of her loss. She started with the closet, carefully removing each item. Her hands shook as she folded Melissa's high school graduation dress, remembering how proud her daughter had looked walking across that stage. Each piece of clothing carried memories: the blouse Melissa wore on her first date with Brandon, the skirt she'd saved up for months to buy. As she cleared the top shelf, her hands encountered items that didn't belong to Melissa. A man's watch, a University of Miami sweater, size large, a cologne bottle. Brandon's things. Linda's jaw tightened. She'd known he stayed over sometimes, despite her objections. She'd raised Melissa with strong values, insisted on purity before marriage. But young love had its own rules, and Brandon Whitmore had been very persuasive. Handsome, charming, from a wealthy family, he'd swept Melissa off her feet. And look where it had led them. Linda fetched another box and began packing Brandon's belongings separately. A few shirts, some cassette tapes, a tennis racket, various toiletries. She labeled the box clearly, Brandon Whitmore, personal items. The cleaning took nearly 3 hours. By the time she finished, her back ached and her hands were raw from scrubbing. But Melissa's room looked better. Still a shrine to a missing daughter, but a clean one. The boxes stood stacked against the wall, each one carefully labeled and sealed. Linda loaded Brandon's box into her Honda and sat behind the wheel for a moment, debating. The Whitmores lived in the exclusive Gables Estates area, a world away from her modest neighborhood. She wasn't sure they'd even be home after the morning's events, but they had household staff who could accept the delivery. The drive took 20 minutes. The houses grew larger and the lawns more manicured with each passing block. The Whitmore estate sat behind an imposing iron gate, all Mediterranean-style stucco and terracotta tiles. Linda parked just outside and retrieved the box. She'd barely stepped out when Gregory emerged from the garage, apparently heading to his Mercedes. His face darkened the instant he saw her. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice carried across the driveway. "You're blocking the gate. I'm leaving, and you need to leave too. You're not welcome on this property." Linda held up the box. "I'm just returning Brandon's belongings. They were in Melissa's room." "Then leave it there." He gestured dismissively at the ground. "Someone will deal with it. Now move your pathetic car." Fighting the urge to throw the box at his head, Linda set it carefully on the driveway. She returned to her car and pulled forward, allowing Gregory's Mercedes to reverse past her. He lowered his window as he passed. "I'm leaving shortly, but when I return, I don't want to see you or your piece of junk car anywhere near my property. Understood?" Without waiting for a response, he sped off. Linda sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, taking deep breaths. Through her windshield, she could see the box sitting abandoned on the pristine driveway. It bothered her, leaving Brandon's things like unwanted garbage. Making a quick decision, she got out again and retrieved the box. She walked to the front door and rang the bell. Daniel answered, looking surprised. "Mrs. Caro? I'm sorry to bother you." She held out the box. "These are Brandon's things. I just wanted to make sure someone actually received them. I'll go now. I don't want to cause trouble." "Actually," Daniel stepped aside, "Mom and I were just going through Brandon's room ourselves. There's something you should see. Please, come in." "Your father warned me to be gone before he returns." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "Don't worry about him. Please." Against her better judgment, Linda followed him inside. The house was even more impressive than she remembered. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, expensive artwork on every wall. Daniel led her up a curved staircase to Brandon's room. Eleanor looked up from where she knelt beside a box, her usual composed expression softening when she saw Linda. "Linda, thank you for bringing Brandon's things." "Of course." Linda set the box down, noticing several others already packed and labeled. "I see you're doing the same thing I did today." "It seemed like time," Eleanor said quietly, "especially after this morning." Linda noticed a smaller box filled with items she recognized. Melissa's hairbrush, some jewelry, a few books. "I'll take her things with me. Thank you for keeping them." "Linda," Daniel interrupted, picking up an ornate velvet box from Brandon's desk. "This is what we wanted to show you." Linda accepted the box, noting its expensive weight. Inside, nestled in white satin, lay a lingerie set, black lace, clearly costly. A small card was tucked into the lid. "From Otis," written in bold masculine handwriting. "Otis?" Linda looked up, puzzled. "I don't know anyone named Otis. Melissa never mentioned." "Neither do we," Eleanor said. "That's why we thought you might know. We found it in Brandon's closet, hidden behind some shoes." They stared at the intimate gift, all thinking the same troubling thoughts. If someone named Otis had given this to Melissa, why did Brandon have it? Had he intercepted it? Had Melissa shown it to him? The lingerie is brand new, Daniel observed, pointing to the tags. Never worn. Still has the price tag. $200. That was expensive even for 1985. Why would Brandon keep this? Linda asked. If some other man was sending my daughter gifts like this? That's what we can't understand, Eleanor said. Brandon was the jealous type. He would have confronted this Otis person, not hidden evidence in his closet. Linda closed the box decisively. We need to take this to Detective Pram. This could be important. I agree, Daniel said. I'll come with you to the police station. Eleanor nodded. I'll stay here in case Gregory returns. He won't be pleased about this, but the police need to know. Linda gathered the box with Melissa's belongings while Daniel carefully placed the velvet box in a bag. As they prepared to leave, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious Otis, whoever he was, might hold the key to understanding what happened that summer 12 years ago. They walked out of the house toward the garage, Daniel leading the way. The Whitmore garage was more like a showroom, climate-controlled, spotlessly clean, with spaces for 6 vehicles. Daniel's silver BMW sat in the third bay, and he'd already pulled out his keys when they heard the distinctive rumble of Gregory's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. Linda's stomach dropped. Your father's back already. It's fine, Daniel said, but his jaw had tightened. Gregory was out of his car before the engine fully died, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is she still doing here? Daniel, what are you doing with this woman? Dad, calm down. We found something important in Brandon's room. Daniel held up the bag containing the velvet box. Mom and I were packing his things. And you're taking it where? To show the media? To embarrass our family further? To the police? Daniel said firmly. It's evidence. Gregory's face darkened further. Evidence of what? Let me see it. Daniel reluctantly handed over the bag. Gregory yanked out the velvet box, his expression shifting as he saw the contents. Lingerie? You're taking lingerie to the police? Look at the card, Linda interjected. It's from someone named Otis. Neither Eleanor nor I know who that is. And you think this is relevant how? Gregory snapped. Dad, we should have shown this to you first, but you were in such a rush this morning, Daniel said, trying to placate his father. You said you had to get grandmother's anxiety medication. Which I did. Gregory patted his jacket pocket. That doesn't explain why you're conspiring with her. He jerked his head toward Linda. No one's conspiring, Daniel said wearily. We found this hidden in Brandon's closet. Don't you think it's strange? Some man sending Melissa expensive lingerie? You called me to help pack Brandon's room this morning, and I told you I was busy, Gregory said, deflecting. Where exactly did you find this? Behind some shoes on his closet shelf. Dad, do you know who Otis is? Gregory's hesitation was brief but noticeable. How would I know every person my son associated with? Maybe that person was one of Melissa's ex-boyfriends. Who knows? We're taking it to the police, Daniel said with finality. They need to know about this. Fine, but I'm coming with you. Gregory pocketed his car keys. And I'm driving. Give me your keys. Dad? Your keys, Daniel. Now. Daniel handed them over reluctantly. Gregory turned to Linda. You'll follow in your own vehicle. We're not carpooling like some kind of family outing. Linda bit back her response and simply nodded. At the station, they were informed that Detective Pram was in the field, still coordinating the search at the Everglades. A younger officer, badge-reading Martinez, took their information. We'll log this into evidence immediately, Officer Martinez assured them, carefully handling the velvet box with gloved hands. The detective will want to see this as soon as he returns. What can you do with it? Daniel asked. Several things. We'll dust for fingerprints, though the fabric might make that challenging. We'll also check our database for anyone with the first name Otis in the area. Homestead isn't that big, and Otis isn't exactly a common name. Linda noticed the officer examining the lingerie tags more closely. This is from Eloise Boutique in Coral Gables, high-end place. They might have purchase records, even from 1985. Some of these exclusive shops keep detailed client information. That's good, Daniel said. Anything that might help identify this person? Throughout the conversation, Gregory's phone rang repeatedly. Each time he'd glance at the screen and immediately silence it, his agitation growing more visible. "Sir, do you need to take that?" Officer Martinez asked after the fourth interruption. "No, it's just business," Gregory said tersely. Daniel frowned. "Dad, if it's urgent—" "I said it's fine," Gregory snapped. They completed the evidence forms, each providing their contact information. As they walked back to the parking lot, Gregory's phone rang again. "For God's sake, Dad, just answer it," Daniel said, exasperated. "Is it from the office?" Gregory fumbled with his words. "No, yes, it's complicated. Look, we need to get home. I have matters to attend to at the office." "We still need to finish packing Brandon's room," Daniel reminded him. "And Mrs. Caro needs to collect Melissa's belongings." "Whatever. She can follow us back and get them," Gregory said impatiently. "You'll ride with me." "Actually, Dad, since you need to go to the office, why don't you take my car there? I'll ride with Mrs. Caro back to the house. We can finish packing while you handle your business." Gregory's phone rang yet again. This time, Linda caught a glimpse of the screen. No name, just a number. Gregory declined the call with visible frustration. "Fine, whatever. I need to deal with this." Gregory fumbled for Daniel's keys in his pocket. As he pulled them out, another keychain fell to the asphalt with a metallic clink. Linda's eyes were drawn to it immediately. Among the keys was one with a small label. She could make out an O at the beginning, but before she could read more, Gregory snatched it up. "Dad, what was—" "Nothing. Just keys to the office storage units." Gregory pocketed the keychain quickly, too quickly. "I'll take your car to the office. You two do whatever you need to do. Just don't take all day." He strode to Daniel's BMW without another word, leaving Linda and Daniel standing in the parking lot. "Your father seems stressed," Linda observed carefully. Daniel sighed. "He's been like this since Brandon disappeared. Throws himself into work, snaps at everyone. Mom says it's how he processes grief, but—" He shrugged. "Shall we head back?" "I'm sorry you have to drive." "It's no problem," Linda said. They walked to her Honda, though her mind was still on that keychain. Had she imagined it, or had there been more letters after that O? And why had Gregory reacted so strongly to dropping it? They arrived back at the Whitmore estate 20 minutes later. As Linda pulled into the circular driveway, she noticed a man standing in the garage near Gregory's Mercedes. He was middle-aged, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, the uniform of domestic staff. "That's Ray Delane," Daniel explained as they got out of the car. "Dad's driver. Been with him for years. He doesn't always need him, but he called him whenever he needed." Ray approached them with a warm smile that seemed genuine. He was perhaps 50, with graying hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Mr. Daniel, good to see you." "Hey, Ray." Daniel shook his hand. "This is Mrs. Caro, Melissa's mother." "Ma'am?" Ray nodded respectfully. "I'm sorry for your troubles." "Thank you," Linda said, studying him. There was something comforting about his demeanor, a stark contrast to Gregory's hostility. "Your father called," Ray explained to Daniel. "Asked me to take his car to the office and drive your BMW back here. You know how he is about that Mercedes." Daniel chuckled. "God forbid anyone else touches it. Thanks for doing this, Ray." "No trouble at all. I'll have it back within the hour." They left Ray in the garage and headed inside. Eleanor was in the living room, a cardboard box at her feet. She looked up as they entered, her face showing the strain of the day. "How did it go at the police station?" she asked. "Fine, Mom. I'll fill you in later," Daniel said. "Is this Melissa's things?" "Everything I could find." Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt. "Some clothes, jewelry, a few photographs. Not much, really. They didn't have much time to accumulate things together." Linda accepted the box, her throat tight. "Thank you for saving these." Eleanor stepped forward and embraced her, a surprising gesture from the usually reserved woman. "I'm sorry for Gregory's behavior earlier, and always, really. We're both mothers who lost our children. We should have supported each other instead of—" She pulled back, eyes glistening. "I hope the police find answers soon. We all deserve closure." "Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot." Daniel offered to walk her out, but Linda declined. "I can manage. You should stay with your mother." She carried the box through the marble foyer and out the front door. The afternoon sun was harsh, making her squint as she walked toward her car. She'd just opened her trunk when she heard voices near the front gate. Ray was talking to someone, a younger man, maybe early 30s. Linda pretended to arrange the box in her trunk while observing them. The younger man was stocky, with dark hair and nervous mannerisms. He kept shifting his weight, glancing around as if worried about being seen. As she got into her driver's seat and started to reverse, Linda got a better view. The man wore a gold chain necklace with large letter pendants. Even from this distance, she could make out a prominent O at the beginning. Her pulse quickened. Was that an S at the end? She slowed her reversal, adjusting her rearview mirror. Ray had noticed the necklace too. She saw him reach for it, his lips moving. The younger man stepped back, but Ray grabbed the chain. Through her partially open window, she caught fragments of their conversation carried on the afternoon breeze. "Boss said—" Ray's voice was firm. "Don't wear this." The younger man protested, but Ray was already pulling the necklace over his head. Then, with a grip that belied his earlier gentleness, Ray seized the man's arm and steered him toward Gregory's Mercedes. Linda's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. The name Otis, the O and S on that necklace, it couldn't be a coincidence. She continued backing out slowly, trying to appear uninterested. But she kept watching as Ray practically shoved the younger man into the passenger seat of the Mercedes. Ray got behind the wheel, and the car pulled out of the driveway with unusual speed. Linda made a split-second decision. Instead of turning left toward home, she turned right, following the Mercedes at what she hoped was an inconspicuous distance. Her heart pounded as she tried to process what she'd witnessed. Who was that man? Why did Ray seem so concerned about the necklace? And why did he mention boss, presumably Gregory? Linda maintained a careful distance, letting another car slip between them as they headed toward the main road. She'd never followed anyone before, had only seen it done in movies. Every red light made her panic that she'd lose them. Every turn required split-second decisions. The Mercedes headed toward downtown Homestead's business district. After 15 minutes, it pulled into the parking lot of a modern office building, Whitmore Industries, according to the large sign out front. Linda recognized it. Everyone in Homestead knew Gregory's real estate development company. She parked across the street behind a delivery truck, giving her a partial view of the building's entrance. Her hands shook as she turned off the engine. What was she doing? Following prominent citizens around town like some kind of private detective? But then she remembered that necklace, the letters O and S, Ray's urgent words about the boss. The Mercedes sat idling near the entrance. Within minutes, Gregory emerged from the building, his stride purposeful. He was still wearing the same clothes from the morning, but looked more agitated, constantly checking his watch. Ray got out of the driver's seat as Gregory approached. Linda watched them exchange keys, Ray handing over the Mercedes keys and accepting Daniel's BMW keys in return. Gregory slid into the driver's seat of his beloved Mercedes, while Ray walked to the BMW parked in a reserved spot. The younger man, Otis, remained in the Mercedes's passenger seat. Both cars pulled out of the lot. The BMW turned left, presumably heading back to the Whitmore estate. The Mercedes turned right, heading south. Linda waited a beat, then followed. They were leaving Homestead's commercial district, passing through residential neighborhoods that grew sparser with each mile. Soon they were on US 1, heading toward Florida City. Linda's confusion grew. Where could they be going? Then Gregory's Mercedes took the familiar turnoff, the entrance to Everglades National Park, the same route she'd driven that morning. Linda's chest tightened. Why would Gregory bring this mysterious young man here? She let several visitor vehicles get between them as they entered the park. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sawgrass prairies. Tourist traffic was lighter than in the morning, but still provided cover. Gregory's car pulled into the Ernest Cove Visitor Center parking lot. Linda found a spot behind a large RV where she could observe without being obvious. She watched Gregory and the young man exit the vehicle and head toward one of the marked trails. Linda waited a full minute before following. She grabbed a park brochure and held it open. Just another tourist consulting a map. The main trail was busy enough that she could maintain distance without seeming suspicious. For the first half hour, they followed the standard tourist path. Linda pretended to photograph birds and vegetation whenever they glanced back. The landscape gradually changed from wetlands to a rockier terrain. A wooden sign indicated they were entering the Long Pine Key region. The elevation increased subtly. The limestone ground became more prominent, and scattered pine trees replaced the sawgrass. From certain vantage points, Linda could see the vast swampy areas stretching to the horizon. The contrast was striking, dry, rocky ridges rising like islands from the watery prairie. A few other tourists dotted the trail, but as the afternoon wore on, their numbers dwindled. Linda's unease grew. The deeper they went, the more isolated it became. Then she saw Gregory and his companion veer off the main trail onto an unmarked path. Linda's heart raced. Following them now meant abandoning the safety of public spaces. But she'd come this far. She waited until they were almost out of sight, then followed. The unofficial trail was rougher, requiring careful navigation over limestone outcroppings and through dense vegetation. Sweat trickled down her back in the humid air. Mosquitoes buzzed around her face. After another 20 minutes of difficult hiking, she heard voices ahead. Linda crept forward, using a thick stand of sawgrass and limestone boulders as cover. Through the vegetation, she could see them in a small clearing on a dry ridge. They were completely alone out here. "Point to the exact spot," Gregory's voice carried clearly in the still air. "I need to know precisely where you buried the bitch's body. If the police get close, I need to be prepared." Linda's blood ran cold. She pressed herself lower behind the rocks, barely breathing. The younger man, Gregory had called him Otis, walked to a section of ground heavy with brush and undergrowth. "Here, I buried Melissa right here, 6 feet down, just like you said. The limestone was tough, but we got through it with the tools you gave us." The casual way he said her daughter's name made Linda bite her lip to keep from crying out. Her baby was here, in this God-forsaken wilderness? Good, leave it undisturbed. Gregory surveyed the area with a calculating expression. No one would stumble across this spot accidentally. You'd have to know exactly where to look. "What about me?" Otis's voice turned pleading. "You said you'd help me. The police found the car. That lingerie gift." "You were stupid to use your real name on that card," Gregory snapped. "I told you to woo the girl, make Brandon jealous enough to leave her, not send her lingerie with a signed card that he'd keep." "You said to make it convincing, and it was your idea in the first place." "Enough?" Gregory held up a hand. "I have an offer. You have 2 choices. 1, disappear. Leave Florida tonight, go to another state, never contact anyone here again. But I won't give you a cent." Otis started to protest, but Gregory continued. 2, Go to the police. Confess that you murdered the newlyweds. Tell them you were Melissa's ex-boyfriend, crazy with jealousy. You killed them both, buried their bodies, sank the car in the Everglades. Take full responsibility." "Why would I?" "Because I'll pay you $300,000 to do it. Money in an offshore account your family can access while you're in prison. You'll give everyone closure, stop the investigation, you'll never mention my name or my company's, and you'll be rich." "My father won't agree to this," Otis said weakly. "You're not a child anymore. Make your own decision. As for prison time, I have connections. You won't serve as long as you think." Linda watched in horror as Otis slowly nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. For the money." "Smart choice. Now let's go. It's getting late." They turned to head back the way they'd come. Linda's mind raced. She needed to call the police immediately, but not until they were far enough away. She pressed herself deeper into the vegetation as their footsteps grew closer, past her hiding spot, then gradually faded. When she was certain they were gone, Linda pulled out her cell phone with trembling hands. The signal was weak, just 2 bars, but it would have to do. She dialed Detective Pram's direct number, praying it would connect. The call went through, though static crackled on the line. "Detective?" "It's Linda Caro." She spoke quickly, afraid of losing the connection. "I'm at Everglades National Park, Long Pine Key area. I followed Gregory Whitmore here. He's with a man named Otis. I heard everything. Otis buried Melissa's body here. Gregory's paying him to take the blame for both murders." "Mrs. Caro, what you've done is extremely dangerous." The detective's voice was urgent through the static. "Give me your exact location." Linda described the trail, the turnoff, the landmarks she'd noticed. "They're heading back to the parking lot now. Gregory's trying to cover everything up." "We're mobilizing units now. Stay where you are. Stay hidden. We'll be there as fast as possible." The line went dead. Linda stared at the phone, then at the spot Otis had indicated. Her daughter was there, had been there for 12 years. So close, yet hidden in this vast wilderness. Tears streamed down her face as she began to carefully make her way back toward the main trail. She had to be careful, had to avoid Gregory and Otis, had to trust that Detective Pram would arrive in time. But at least now she knew. The truth, horrible as it was finally coming to light. Linda moved carefully back through the rough terrain, her legs shaking from both exertion and shock. The late afternoon sun slanted through the pine trees, casting long shadows that made navigation treacherous. Every few steps she glanced over her shoulder, terrified of encountering Gregory or Otis on the narrow trail. The hike back seemed endless. Her mind reeled with what she'd witnessed. Gregory's cold discussion of her daughter's burial site, his plan to frame Otis while keeping his own hands clean. Melissa was here, had been here all along in this remote wilderness. The thought made her stomach churn. By the time she reached the main trail, the visitor traffic had thinned considerably. A few late-day hikers passed her, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Linda forced herself to walk normally, to blend in, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The parking lot finally came into view, and Linda nearly sobbed with relief. But the scene that greeted her was dramatically different from when she'd left. Police cruisers filled the lot, their lights creating a chaotic pattern of red and blue. Park rangers had cordoned off sections with yellow tape. Tourists were being directed away from the area. At the center of the commotion, she spotted Otis in handcuffs, seated on the curb with an officer standing guard. Gregory stood near his Mercedes, gesticulating wildly as he spoke to Detective Pram and 2 other officers. Even from a distance, Linda could see his face was flushed, his usual composure cracking. Linda hurried toward them. Detective Pram noticed her approach and moved to intercept her, but she pushed past him. "He's lying to you," she called out, pointing at Gregory. "Whatever he's telling you is a lie." Gregory's eyes snapped to her, his expression shifting from indignation to fury. "This woman has been stalking me. She followed me here from my home. I demand you arrest her for harassment." "I heard everything," Linda continued, addressing Detective Pram. At the Whitmore house, I saw Ray Dulane with this man," she pointed to Otis. "And Ray took a necklace from him, said boss didn't want him wearing it. The necklace had letters O and S." "She's delusional," Gregory sputtered, grief-stricken and making up stories. "Then I followed them here," Linda pressed on. "I heard Gregory tell Otis to show him exactly where he buried my daughter. I heard him offer Otis $300,000 to take the blame for both murders while keeping Gregory's name out of it." Detective Pram's expression had grown increasingly grave. He turned to Gregory. "Mr. Whitmore, these are serious allegations." "Allegations from a woman who's harassed my family for 12 years, Gregory shot back. "I came here to mourn my son in private. This man," he gestured dismissively at Otis, "is a bodyguard my driver recommended. I don't even know his last name." "He called him Otis," Linda insisted, "the same name on that lingerie card, and Otis showed him where Melissa is buried, in the Long Pine Key area off the trail." Detective Pram studied both of them, then turned to Otis. "Sir, what's your name?" Otis looked between Gregory and the police, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cooling afternoon air. I want a lawyer." "That's your right," Detective Pram said. He nodded to his partner, Detective Morgan. "Take Mr. Whitmore and Mrs. Caro to separate areas. No one leaves until we sort this out." He approached Otis. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to show us what Mrs. Caro claims you showed Mr. Whitmore. If she's lying, she'll be charged with filing a false report. If she's telling the truth." He let the implication hang. 2 officers escorted Otis to a police vehicle while others gathered equipment from their trunks: shovels, evidence bags, cameras. Linda was led to a bench near the visitor center, an officer standing nearby. Gregory was taken to another area, protesting loudly about his rights and his lawyers. The wait was excruciating. Linda watched the sun sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. After 30 minutes, she heard more vehicles arriving. Her heart leapt when she saw Daniel's BMW pull up, Eleanor in the passenger seat. They hurried over, confusion clear on their faces. "Linda, what's happening?" Daniel asked. "We got a call that Dad was here." "Mom, they said Dad's been detained," Eleanor said, looking between Linda and the officer. "What's going on?" Linda took a shaky breath and told them everything. Following Ray and the young man, the overheard conversation in the woods, Gregory's plan to pay Otis to take the fall. She watched their faces transform from confusion to disbelief to horror. "That's insane," Eleanor whispered, sinking onto the bench beside Linda. "Gregory would never—" He couldn't have. Daniel's expression was harder to read. He stood with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, staring at his father across the parking lot. "Actually, Mom, it makes a terrible kind of sense." "Daniel, think about it. Dad never wanted Brandon to marry Melissa. He was furious when they eloped, and after they disappeared, he threw himself into work, barely mentioned Brandon unless someone else brought him up first." "That's how he grieves." "Or how he hides guilt," Daniel said quietly. They lapsed into tense silence. The waiting stretched on. 40 minutes, 50, an hour. Linda found herself praying, something she hadn't done in years. Please let them find her. Please let this finally be over. Finally, Detective Pram's radio crackled to life. He listened intently, his face grave. After a brief exchange, he approached their group. "The field team has discovered human remains at the location indicated. They're securing the scene and will transport the evidence for forensic analysis." Eleanor let out a strangled sob. Linda felt the world tilt slightly, and Daniel's hand on her shoulder steadied her. Across the lot, Gregory had clearly heard the news as well. He suddenly bolted, trying to push past the officer guarding him. But Daniel was already moving, intercepting his father before he could take more than a few steps. "Dad, don't be stupid," Daniel said, blocking Gregory's path. "You have a lot to explain. You know there's no running from this." "Get out of my way, son. You don't understand." I understand more than you think. Daniel's voice was steady, but cold. Now stop making this worse. Officers moved in, restraining Gregory more firmly. As they searched him for weapons, patting down his pockets, a small key ring fell to the asphalt with a metallic clink. Linda recognized it immediately, the same keys she'd glimpsed earlier. One key had a small tag with OTIS written in black marker. Detective Pram picked it up, examining it closely. Mr. Whitmore, care to explain why you have a key labeled with the name of someone you claim not to know? Gregory's lips pressed into a thin line. He said nothing. Is this related to your son's remains? The detective pressed. Did you mark it with Otis's name to shift blame if it was ever found? Still silence. Eleanor suddenly stood, her grief transforming into fury. You've been lying to us all these years, Gregory. Where is our son? She strode over and snatched the key from Detective Pram's hand, examining it closely. Her face went pale. This looks like a key to the memorial house, the columbariums where we keep family members' ashes. Detective Pram's partner radioed the field team, receiving clearance to investigate. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore, he addressed Eleanor and Daniel, we'll need you to show us this location. Daniel nodded immediately. Of course. He turned to Linda. I'll update you as soon as I know anything. Thank you, Linda whispered. Eleanor and Daniel left with a police escort. The field team began returning from the woods, carrying secured evidence bags. Detective Pram approached Linda one more time. Mrs. Caro will need to return to the station. You'll need to give a formal statement, and we need to process Mr. Whitmore and the other suspect through booking. As officers read Gregory and Otis their rights, Otis called out desperately, You still owe me that money? We had a deal. Gregory's face contorted with rage. Not a single cent, you moron. You couldn't even follow simple instructions. They were separated and placed in different patrol cars. Linda stood on shaky legs, fishing her car keys from her pocket. I don't think I can drive, she admitted to Detective Pram. Not after... That's understandable. He gestured to another officer. Officer Martinez will drive your vehicle to the station. You can ride with me. Linda handed over her keys gratefully and climbed into the detective's car. As they pulled out of the Everglades National Park, she stared back at the wilderness that had hidden her daughter's body for 12 long years. The truth was finally emerging from the swamp, dark and terrible, but at least it was the truth. The Homestead police station was a flurry of controlled chaos when they arrived. Through the glass doors, Linda could see officers moving with purpose, phones ringing, the mechanical sounds of a system processing a major case. As Detective Pram escorted her inside, she spotted a familiar figure seated in the booking area, Ray Delane, Gregory's trusted driver, his earlier warmth replaced by hollow-eyed defeat. We picked him up 20 minutes ago, Detective Pram explained, following her gaze. Otis gave us enough during the ride back to secure an arrest warrant. Linda watched as Gregory and Otis were led through the booking process. Photographs, fingerprints, personal belongings cataloged and bagged. Gregory maintained his imperious bearing even in handcuffs, demanding his lawyer, threatening lawsuits. Otis, by contrast, seemed to have shrunk into himself, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Mrs. Caro, this way, please. Detective Pram guided her to a small interview room. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the fading daylight outside. He offered her coffee, which she declined, and water, which she accepted gratefully. First, I want to say how sorry I am, the detective began, his weathered face showing genuine sympathy. No parent should have to go through what you've endured. 12 years of not knowing, and now this. The tears came then, hot and sudden. Linda had held them back during the chaos at the park, but here in this quiet room, faced with simple human kindness, her composure crumbled. At least now I know, she managed between sobs. All these years, I wondered if she was out there somewhere, suffering, trapped, calling for me, or if she'd really left voluntarily, chosen Brandon's world over mine. At least now I know she's not in pain. She hasn't been tortured or held captive or—" She couldn't finish. Detective Pram pushed a box of tissues across the table. "I understand you want to know what happened to your daughter. I need to take your formal statement first, then I'll share what Otis told us during the transport back from the burial site." Linda nodded, composing herself. She began with the morning's phone call, the discovery of the car. She detailed the confrontation with Gregory, finding Brandon's belongings, the mysterious lingerie from Otis. Her voice grew stronger as she described following Ray and the young man, overhearing their conversation, trailing Gregory to the Everglades. Detective Pram took careful notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When she finished, he set down his pen and leaned back. Otis Dunhall, that's his full name, was quite forthcoming once he realized Gregory wasn't going to protect him. He admitted that Gregory hired him in early 1985 to pursue your daughter, to make Brandon jealous enough to end the relationship. "But why?" Linda asked, though she suspected she knew. Gregory disapproved of the match from the beginning. His words, according to Otis, were that he didn't want a poor woman joining the family. Brandon was set to inherit the majority of Whitmore Industries. Gregory wanted him married to someone with education and social standing who could be an asset to the business, not, quote, someone who only graduated from high school. Fresh anger flared through Linda's grief. My daughter was worth 10 of their society women. She was kind, loving, devoted. "I'm sure she was," Detective Pram said gently. And apparently Brandon thought so too. Otis said he tried various approaches, showing up where Melissa worked, sending gifts, trying to create situations where Brandon would see them together. But their relationship was solid. Nothing worked. "So they eloped?" Linda said. "Yes, and that's when Gregory's plan turned darker. He paid Otis and his father Ray to follow the couple on their honeymoon. They were staying at a beach cottage in Dania Beach. The plan was to kill Melissa during a staged robbery while Brandon was out, make it look random." Linda's hands clenched in her lap. But Brandon came back. The detective's expression darkened. Otis admitted something else. His father Ray had intentions toward Melissa. What was supposed to be a quick killing became something worse. Ray assaulted her after she was dead. Brandon returned from his evening beach walk early and found them. Bile rose in Linda's throat. Her baby girl violated even in death. Oh, God. Brandon fought them, tried to call for help. They hadn't meant to kill him. Gregory's son was supposed to survive to mourn his wife. But with Brandon as a witness, they had no choice. They killed him too. And Gregory covered it up. He had resources, private trucks to move the bodies and evidence, a boat to dump the car in the Everglades where he thought currents would eventually carry it to sea. The cottage was professionally cleaned within hours, new bedding matching the old, all traces removed. When the owner checked on them after they failed to check out, it looked like they'd simply left. "No security cameras in 1985, Linda said numbly. "Exactly. The police investigated, but without bodies, without evidence of foul play, with the car missing. The assumption was they'd run off together. Maybe had an accident somewhere remote." Gregory played the grieving father perfectly. "He cremated his own son and hid the urn under another name," Linda said. "What kind of monster?" "The kind who values control and reputation over everything else, apparently." "But why would Gregory keep them both if they killed his son too?" Linda asked. Otis said they threatened to go to the police if Gregory ever turned on them. It was all or nothing. Either they stuck together or they all went down together. A knock at the door interrupted them. An officer leaned in. "Detective, the team's back from the memorial house with the Whitmore family." "Thank you." He turned to Linda. They found Brandon's remains in an urn registered under Otis Dunhall's name, hidden in a section separate from the main Whitmore family area. "I need to interview Daniel and Eleanor now. Would you mind waiting? There may be updates from forensics, and I'm sure the family will want to speak with you." Linda nodded. She was led to a small waiting room, plastic chairs, old magazines, a water cooler in the corner. Through the doorway, she glimpsed Eleanor and Daniel in the main waiting area. Eleanor's usual composure had shattered completely. She looked aged by decades in just hours. Daniel supported her, his own face drawn with shock and grief. They saw Linda and approached. Eleanor reached out, grasping Linda's hands. "I'm so sorry, so very sorry for everything Gregory did. To Melissa, to Brandon, to you." "This happened to all of us," Linda said, squeezing back. "It's not your fault. You're victims too." "If I'd known, if I'd had any idea." Eleanor's voice broke. "Mom, don't," Daniel said softly. "No one could have imagined Dad capable of this." Detective Pram appeared. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to speak with you first." Daniel nodded, giving his mother's shoulder a final squeeze. "I'll update you both after," he promised, following the detective. An officer approached. "Ladies, I need to separate you into different waiting areas, standard procedure during ongoing interviews." Eleanor was led one direction, Linda another. She found herself in a smaller room, just 4 chairs and a small table with outdated magazines. Alone, finally, truly alone, the weight of the day crashed over her. She sank into a chair and let the tears flow freely. 12 years of wondering, of false hopes and dead ends, of friends and family gently suggesting she move on and accept reality. 12 years of defending her daughter against Gregory Whitmore's insinuations and accusations. 12 years of lonely birthdays and empty Christmases and Mother's Days with no call, no card, no sign. But also 12 years of doubt. The insidious voice that whispered maybe Melissa had chosen Brandon's glamorous world over their modest life. Maybe her daughter had been ashamed of their small house, their old car, their paycheck-to-paycheck existence. Maybe love hadn't been enough. Now she knew the truth. Melissa hadn't abandoned her. Her daughter had been stolen, murdered for the crime of loving above her station, for daring to marry into a family that saw her as unworthy. She'd died at 24, probably terrified, probably calling for her mother. But she'd died loved. Brandon had loved her enough to defy his father, to choose her over wealth and position. He'd loved her enough to fight her killers, to die trying to protect her honor even in death. That was real love, not the shallow affection Gregory had wanted for his son, some society marriage built on bank accounts and business mergers. Linda pulled a tissue from her pocket, wiping her eyes. The grief would never fully leave, she knew that. But there was relief, too, a lifting of the terrible weight of not knowing. She could bury her daughter properly now, could visit a grave, bring flowers, talk to her, could finally, truly mourn.